Hi, everyone. Welcome to the summit. I'm Kim Leitzes here, the APAC Managing Director for Launchmetrics, and I'm super excited for my chat with Lisa Yu, who's a VP at Genuine German and CEO of GenLab. Genuine German is a one-stop China market entry agency that does everything from your TP needs and your marketing, consulting and services, and as well as GenLab, which helps bring and incubate brands and from China primarily to rest of world. So really excited to begin today's conversation. Lisa has a really interesting background, having moved from L'Oreal to Genuine German, and she's going to share with us some insights and learnings and kind of what she's kind of experienced at this time. So to sort of kick off, Lisa, could you tell us about that transition from working in-house at a beauty brand to now working with multiple brands across different industries, and kind of in the meantime, give us a sense of your background?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Lisa, and I'm super excited to be here today. I started my whole career at L'Oreal, which is a big multinational cosmetic company. And when I came to China 5 years ago, I was responsible for the social transformation across the group, so across all beauty brands. And what that means is that we wanted to have a more professionalized approach towards KOLs and influencer marketing. So it was more like an in-house consulting role to see or to support the brands on social influencer strategy. And then in 2020, when I moved to Genuine German, basically, I think the biggest difference and change was this real and closer connection to business that I had. So the whole marketing activities that I did or that I've consulted previously was now directly connected to a business. But not a big business that would run on its own anyways. We primarily work with brands that have never entered the Chinese market or are very freshly entering. So building up a business of e-commerce and digital with the support of influencers, you could really see, the direct kind of return on investment or the direct output of influencer marketing and strategy. Yeah.
So I'm sure there's very different needs for brands that you work with now versus, what the objectives were at L'Oreal. What do these brands come for, and do they usually have a clear goal in mind when it comes to the China market?
Yeah, I think most of the brands that are entering China see the whole vision or growth of the country and definitely would like to be part of it. So we always talk about the China speed and that everything is possible here. So the objective or the clear goal in mind is definitely business growth or incremental sales. Yeah, versus at L'Oreal, that's definitely also one core objective. But for me at that time, it was more around gathering all the information that we had and make it more more professionalized and more related to all the strategies to have a synergy across all the divisions. So for the clients entering China, it's really the first time and such a difficult word and maze to navigate through. So we're really trying to help them step by step to build out their product portfolio in very close connection to their actual business.
Could you share some examples of how brands tailor a separate strategy for the Chinese market versus, say, maybe their local market outside of China?
Right. So I think the Western world and the Chinese world is super, super different. So this is why we always tell our clients there's no one size fits all solution for the whole world. Because just taking a very simple example of the lipstick, if the client would want to market it in the Western world, they probably would go for maybe the Kylie Jenner lip approach, which is super full and sexy. But taking the same assets and visuals to China, it probably won't resonate that well with Chinese customers because they might want something more cute or more for thinner lips, for example. So it's really important to localize the content in the country and really produce content that Chinese customer would like to see. So we always give the advice to say, without losing the brand core or the brand identity, let's find some, real good content that can spread your values, but also resonate with the local consumers at the same time on social.
And obviously, tailoring local content and products is a pretty big endeavor. How in the strategy of that market positioning, what is the role of KOL marketing in helping reposition brands in the China market?
Right, that's such an interesting question. I would actually start to look at traditional media formats. So if we look at TV and outdoor, where it really was straight from the brand to the media to the consumer. So the brand message was 100% controlled. Whereas with the evolving digital landscape and the involvement of social influencers, we have another tool, channel, or advocates basically that talk about your brand, where it's not directly from the brand to the consumer, but you have a real person in between. And that can have two sides of the medal. On the one side, it's probably more real content and more approachable for the consumer. On the other hand, it might not be 100% the brand voice. So it's really about balancing how can I leverage the influencer in a way where the values of my brand resonate also with the KOL values, and at the same time is so good amplified that the audience and that the consumer likes to read about it.
And so what does that mean, like when it comes to how what are the different things you're looking at to assess, okay, is this KOL the right fit? Like obviously a lot of brands, they really want to understand how does this KOL specifically boost traffic. Others might be looking at other attributes and metrics, like what should people be looking at? Because I think you mentioned earlier that at L'Oreal, they really decided to bring together a systematic tool in order to do that, right? So how should other companies be thinking about this? And obviously at Launchmetrics, we have a particular method that we've developed with Park Glue over the years that it, has multi-attribute, it's data-driven and such. So what are you seeing from your side?
Right. So there are many metrics one could look at, for example, followers, engagement rate, et cetera. One metric that I found most useful for myself was actually the follower or fans profile. So for example, what age group they are, what kind of keywords they're mostly using. So it's really a combination between social listening and the KOL influencer tool or the metrics. Why? Because when we are selecting the influencer, it's really important that the follower base resonates with the follower base or the base of the audience of the brand. Because, for example, if I would be Judy Doll, I would go for a KOL that is more cute and probably more likely their follower like this kind of beauty style or beauty approach more, and they would be more likely to buy my brand. Other than that, if I would be Tom Ford or Armani, I would go for a more sophisticated look or KOLs whose fan base is maybe slightly a little bit older and more in this business environment or have this taste for something more elegant. Yeah, so I think a follower base is definitely one of the core things to look at.
And it does require having the right tools and social listing analytics to understand that.
Right.
And how is KOL marketing in China different from the rest of the world? Because you've had experience in both Germany and China. What do you sort of observed the key differences people should know about?
Yeah, I think just very top of mind, I would say that in the Western world or in Europe at least, the influencers or KOLs that I have worked with are probably more individual. Whereas in China, what I've experienced it's really becoming an industry and very professionalized. You have all those multi-channel networks or influencer companies that are professionalizing the whole process. And not only in the process of working brands, but also in the process of incubating or developing new influencers. And I think that in the Western world is a little bit more authentic, if you know one can say so, because they evolve from a hobby, or they just want to share something on social media. Whereas in China, when I arrived, it was already professionalized and growing so fast and really becoming an industry.
I will say though, around the world, I do see young children saying they aspire to be influencers. So I do wonder about the professionalism aspect.
Yeah,
and
maybe because it was like 8 years ago in Germany versus now China, so could be a difference. But that's true. Yeah, dream job becoming KOL.
And it's an interesting point you make about the MCNs or the multi-channel networks, because they're really identifying talent, training talent, bringing those resources together. And oftentimes those MCNs are even buying traffic and negotiating with the different social media platforms in order to help grow their roster, right? What are the biggest challenges for brands when they're beginning to work with the MCNs, and how do they best leverage what the MCNs have to offer?
Right. I think because there is so much choice and so many companies offering the service or this method, it's really hard to navigate through a little bit. So how do I choose the right partner to work with? How do I make the actual selection? Can it meet my objective? So the match between my actual business objective versus the toolkit I'm going to use or the advocates I'm going to use is quite important. So I feel like that's also the main challenge, because we at L'Oreal and even with our brands today, we see a major shift from marketing investment in the mix of media shifting heavily towards social. For example, the brands we enter in China with, they only have social budget investments, so no media at all anymore. So the scale and the amount of influences needed, combined with the complex landscape, I think that's a real challenge to have the whole project management and navigation through that entire process and aspect.
But it's interesting that you mentioned that the brands you're working with now, when their allocation across the marketing budget is really all social, because when we look at Launchmetrics insights dashboards and we compare whether it's like direct to consumer first brands versus more like heritage or legacy brands, that's the biggest difference, is that for some of them, influencer and KOL can be 80+% of what's driving the conversation and awareness for them. And so it's really a good point that you raised that. What do you think is the most common misconception when it comes to KOL and influencer marketing?
I think the common misperception is to say, oh, I'm going to launch my brand in China, I'm going to use KOLs, and I'm going to make money. So the simplified approach that a lot of people, take. So I just want to say that I think China today is so different than it was 10 years ago. Maybe this kind of approach worked 10 years ago, just to put on shelf on Tmall, leveraging the 100 influencers at that time that were available, and then your brand were selling because you are special. There weren't many foreign brands at that time in China, but today, really, the brands are competing with local brands. It has become much more, rich in terms of approaches, content, and ways to play it. So I think that's a common misperception, that many people think, oh, influencer marketing is super easy. Oh, I just have to buy some influencers and that's it. I think there's a real science behind it, or an art. So I think that would be the common misperception that I have recognized.
So it sounds like you're describing this dynamic of, okay, you can sort of buy the love, buy the advocacy, sort of this like kind of pushing into the market, right?
Yeah.
So how do brands create that pull? Like what are, some of the best strategies and formats you've seen that brands have been able to sort of like get the earned love and
Yeah.
earned compensation, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually super important to, actually crack the code of advocacy and making things go viral or authentic. And I think the pull really will be created if you resonate with values. So what I found missing in China a lot is the whole concept of value-based marketing. Because if you ask a brand, hey, what are you actually standing for? Or, what is the thing that you really take a stand for? Sometimes you don't get an answer. And I think if that is not clear, it's really hard to keep the core and work with an influencer. Because what I've observed many times is that some lipstick posts don't differ from others. So you can't really tell, okay, is this my brand or is this your brand or is it brand C? So the content is super similar because working with the MCNs, working with maybe very fresh KOLs, they just use the same template and they just post about it. But really what creates the pull for myself as a consumer, and when I look at content, it's really original content and where you feel like, oh, I've learned something even, or oh, this is new to me, or oh, this is a good way to apply lipstick, a technique I've never seen, or a way to describe the color I've never heard of. So it's really about, I think, authenticity that comes from value-based marketing, where the core is not loosed, but you have different ways to amplify the content or say things about the product in a new way. Yeah, I think that's the main kind of point to create a pull aspect.
Easier said than done, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
First you gotta figure out, okay, which MCNs are, can provide the data and the insights that we need to do the influencer selection. Then we need to, in common situations, brands have agencies and MCNs giving them like lists and spreadsheets of creators and influencers that they can work with. And then they have to go through the process of, vetting those through. And luckily we have a product that actually helps do that. But and it's been something that, a lot of brands have a very different approach, right? Some will be like, okay, we really, 50% of our selection processes, do they drive traffic, right? And others will be like, okay, we just want to make sure that they resonate with the values of our brand. And so being able to weight that systematically is something that, we've spent years building, so that whether you don't have to be L'Oreal with your own in-house tool to go through that process and selection. And then you get to the next stage, which is, okay, now that I've evaluated, I've looked at KOL audiences and I've profiled them. I've sort of seen what keywords that resonate best with them. And then you finally say, okay, this is my wish list. And the tricky part is then figuring out what exactly is the brief, what is the content angle that I want to inspire the KOLs with, but not necessarily tell them what to post, right? Giving them guidance and direction and values that help them tell a story, but not scripting it to keep it authentic. So, and then the next challenge we've seen is that brands need to then curate to very like China specific moments, right? So these are the e-commerce festivals. You have, Singles Day, L'Oreal 618 Festival. How does the value-based marketing work into like crafting these stories in a very, China market context, right? How is that different than what you've seen in like other markets? And, what have you seen that's worked and, or maybe not worked in that regard?
Yeah. I think value-based marketing is actually a global phenomenon. So I think that's actually the one thing one could scale, or this method you could use in every part of the world, but just the method. Because a couple of days ago, a friend asked me a very interesting question. He asked about the China pride. So how the Gen Z China consumer really is proud of, wearing Chinese clothes where it's literally printed China on your breast, or some new cosmetic brands that are saying, "Oh, I have a Chinese heritage." And I think that's not the phenomenon of the actual China pride. It's more a value deep inside of China Gen Z, because they have been growing up with Western brands, and for them it's a daily thing or a daily product. Whereas the China products or the China pride thing is kind of rooted in them, but there weren't many brands who were speaking or taking a stand for it. So at the time where a brand does that and it resonates with your core values, then the Chinese consumer goes like, "Oh, I kind of want to stand for it. Oh, I want to make people, see that my values are, XYZ." So I think the approach of value-based marketing is really, really scalable, or one could take that in every country and localize it. But what actually comes out of it is super different. So in China, it might be China pride. In the Western world, what I see a lot is the whole idea around sustainability, and creating brands that have a real purpose, or that are contributing good to the world. So I think these are the values that I see really rising up in the West. And in China, it was last year more about the China pride, and that they were proud of the country. And then it's really about brands, how to listen to the consumer and the audiences about that, and putting it smartly into their brand strategy.
I mean, I think that's probably one of the strongest examples in terms of the guochao, the sort of nationalistic pride that's amongst the Gen Z in China. I've heard from friends who are Chinese designers, or even with the Chinese domestic beauty brands, they get so much just organic support from being China designed, China made for the China market. And so that's something that we're definitely seeing, both on a business level, both in the social conversation level, both for immediate impact value. Because at Launchmetrics, we can track, conversations about certain values and topics across, whether it's media or celebrity or KOLs, and even owned social channels. And so that is definitely one of the highest drivers for MIV for a lot of brands. And we've seen it where for some of the Chinese domestic brands, like Launchmetrics, or for example, Li Jiaqi, Austin Lee, one of the biggest beauty influencers, he just organically talks about them and is very, very happy to collaborate and promote China-born brands. So,
Absolutely.
And it's interesting to see too, as these brands began marketing outside of China, and very much seeing them apply influencer marketing, but just on platforms like YouTube and others, and TikTok. So it's really exciting to see the KOL marketing practices come into play across countries. To sum up in one sentence, what's the best advice you would give to brands to grow in the China market? So I guess you're very experienced with sort of the newer brands, and as well as you've seen at the other spectrum with L'Oreal, and kind of what would be your kind of key takeaway for our audience here?
Yeah, I would sum it up into, don't think it's simple, and be creative. Because I feel like there are so many ways to play in this field and to be creative, work with PR boxes, or influencer events. It doesn't really have to be just the media approach, or using KOLs as a media to say, here's the brief, talk about it. Here's the brief, talk about it, and just collecting how many clippings one has. I feel like, these are real people and sometimes we forget about it. Maybe it's even, more resonating for the brand if we just invite them to a coffee and just talk with them about a new product launch. So what do you think about this product? Do you want to do a co-creation or collaboration, or do you want to be involved in the product development? Because everything starts with the consumer. And KOLs are basically, a power consumer who just happens to talk about a brand. So maybe they have the best insights and to start at the product development, and having the whole kind of strategy based around that, or even just to keep the relationship on and talking to them like real people and not treating them as a point of media. I think is the core thing that I've observed and learned over the years.
Yeah, I think that sense of building a community of advocates versus, thinking of it as allocating a budget for a
Exactly.
campaign is probably one of the key
Yeah.
themes. And I think all your insights throughout this conversation have been very to the point, right? It's being able to, one, know that the metrics you're looking at is not just about engagement rate. It matters in terms of both the values of the KOL. Does it resonate with how you want to position the brand? And for beauty brands in particular, I guess the aesthetic, right? Very much the style, making sure that their followers and fan base align with the kind of products that you're bringing. Is it more of a feminine, cute style? Is it more of a sophisticated look, etc.? And so that's kind of part of the selection process. And then you sort of talked about being able to not just have like a one-off, but really, kind of grow that conversation and community over time. So and create that pull effect, when the content is value-based versus the push effect when it's quite more cookie cutter and can't distinguish from one lipstick brand to another, where that's more like a push effect. So really appreciate your time today, Lisa, and excited to see what, particularly, especially with Gen Lab as well, to see how that brings brands to the world. And always love talking about all things KOL. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and hope to enjoy the rest of the sessions at the summit.
Thank you.